Okay, it being 6:03, I'll declare the August 2020 Ordinary Council meeting of the Shire of Capel open. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Wadandi people. We wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to all members of Aboriginal communities and their culture, and to their elders past and present, their descendants who are with us today and those who will follow in their footsteps. Record of attendance, we have 8 councillors in attendance, our directors and CEO, and Councillor Dillon is absent on a previously approved leave of absence. Response to previous public questions taken on notice are within the minutes. So now we move to section 4, public question time. First question from Mr. Stephen Rouse. Mr. Rouse is on attendance. We have a significant amount of questions this evening, so we'll take that on notice and provide the answer in the minutes. The next question is from Matthew Mitsopoulos.
Matthew Mitsopoulos, 89 Norman Road, The Plains. Just got a couple of questions, so thank you for the opportunity. The Plains location in the Shire of Capel is unique and is home to some of the most successful agricultural businesses in WA. 3 highly regarded, award-winning cattle studs, a dairy that is a leader in the industry, a sheep stud producing quality genetics sought throughout the country, and a 3rd-generation cattle breeder supplying sought-after beef for the local market. And in the middle of all these businesses is a proposed feedlot sheds, putting us at an unacceptable risk due to the biosecurity threat of disease such as Johne's, foot rot, foot and mouth, and parasites. The feedlot sheds associated practices are not compatible with the Plains area or surrounding agricultural businesses. And with the live export being phased out, the customer now choosing humanely raised and free-range products. My question is, what do the Shire consider a greater asset? These highly regarded agricultural businesses continuing to thrive, produce and supply quality genetics and livestock to the industry without the biosecurity risks associated with confinement feeding from a neighbouring feedlot, or intensive confinement feed sheds, which are likened to export live ships anchored in a paddock in the Shire of Capel, which will no doubt bring controversy, risk and a negative attention.
Thank you, Mr. Mitsopoulos, for the question. The Shire has previously considered a feedlot application. The Shire considered the appropriateness of the land use proposed against the objectives of the existing Town Planning Scheme number 7 and the future zoning of the draft Local Planning Scheme number 8. We recognise the delicate balance between accommodating such a use in a zone that primarily caters to agricultural activities, including intensive agriculture, and the protecting of the amenity and the broader locality where possible. The Development Assessment Panel is now the determining body, who will soon hear an amended feedlot application. The Shire, as the responsible authority, is preparing a report on the application that will be considered by the DAP in making the final decision. The Shire's position on the feedlot application will be detailed in that report, which will be published on the DAP agenda.
Thank you. Second question. Being such a large-scale operation on the subject landholding, the resultant buffer zone cannot be contained on the applicant's property. Some of the affected adjoining landholders to the proposed intensive feedlot will effectively have their property sterilised. This will have adverse effects on continuing in our own established rural pursuits, as we have been doing, and on our ability to build residence or further pursue agricultural industries on our own properties in the future. So, is the Shire of Capel comfortable with the applicant of the proposed intensive sheep feedlot using neighbourhood properties as their buffer zone, when in a civil action it would not be deemed fair and reasonable?
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President. As per the response above, the Shire will thoroughly assess the implications of the proposed development on buffer zones in the Responsible Authority report. It is, however, noted that regarding EPA Guidance Statement number 5 and separation distances, the application includes specific assessments of odour and noise. The proposed buffers remain unchanged from the 2021 application that the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation, as the assessing agency, determined as being acceptable in their January 2021 report.
Thank you. Mrs. Brodman-Mutton.
Thank you, Mr. CEO and President. I am Bronwyn Mutton of 74 Mangles Road, Stirling Estate. My first question this evening is about the intensive sheep feedlot and concerns that the area is simply too wet for an intensive sheep feedlot. Historically, other feedlot proposals in the Shire of Capel have been put forward for the plains locally, but have not progressed due to the wet winters and the many tributaries and streams across this area. Further, it is a designated multi-use wetland. I would add that specifically the plains is known for its very wet paddocks over winter. The applicant stated in his application, "The site has historically been used for sheep grazing," and "The subject site has historically been used for rural pursuit, being the grazing of sheep." These are the two statements. So many farmers in the plains locality are generational farmers and would strongly disagree with these two statements and know that the grazing of large flocks of sheep have not been successful, as it was always known to be too wet for sheep. We cannot see how housing sheep 3 metres above the ground, standing on a mesh floor for about a month, in a shed with no sides, with cold winds and winter deluge driving in on them, can be comfortable for the sheep. My question: why has the applicant stated that historically this area has been used to graze sheep, and what factual evidence does the applicant have to make the above statements?
Thank you, Ms. Mutton. The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President. Thank you, Mrs. Mutton, for the question. The applicant's proposal indicates that the floor for the sheep will be elevated and the shed will be roofed, and therefore sheep will be largely protected from wet conditions as compared to living outdoors at ground level. The applicant's accompanying material states that the animals will be monitored on a daily basis in terms of welfare, with the activities conducted in accordance with the relevant legislation and regulation of animal welfare agencies.
Thank you. A second question is also about the intensive sheep feedlot and about the risk of disease. This proposal is understood to be the largest intensive sheep feedlot in Australia, with the area regarded generally as not being suitable for sheep because it is too wet. How was this related to disease? To fulfil the applicant's requirement of 250,000 sheep per year on a continuous basis, sheep will be purchased from many areas across Western Australia. This specific collection of sheep into one intensive area brings with it potentially unacceptable risk of disease to the surrounding studs and farms and all properties along the many waterways to the Geograph Bay, as well as into adjoining regions. Prevalent within the sheep flock in Western Australia is a disease called Johne's disease, or JD, which is a disease transferable to cattle in certain circumstances, in particular in water contaminated by faeces. From the National Johne's Disease Program website, it states, the main why ovine Johne's disease, OJD, first arrives on a property is on the back of a truck. The most likely way for a flock to become infected with OJD is through the introduction of infected sheep, which makes infected flocks a risk for a region and the whole sheep industry. Once the disease is established in a region, there is an additional risk of it spreading laterally from infected flocks to neighbouring areas. The applicant has proposed to spread part of the manure collected from underneath the sheds to fertilise the land, and if it were to contain JD, would affect the manure. This may pose a serious risk of contamination into streams flowing through the property, which feed into the Ginnedup Brook, Tren Creek and the Capel River. Question: if Johne's disease is detected at the applicant's property, how would the spread of the disease be contained? And more specifically, how would the potentially infected manure be dealt with? How would the studs and farms downstream be managed and compensated, as sheep being sourced from many areas significantly increases the likelihood of JD being introduced into the Capel area?
Thank you, Mrs. Mutton. Johne's disease falls within the scope of biosecurity, which is regulated by the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development and the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation. DPIRD, as the assessing agency, have advised that the standard biosecurity plans are suitable and will be monitored by external agencies, not the Shire of Capel.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Tony Kitchen.
Mr. President, councillors, I'm Tony Kitchen. I live in Boundary Road, Boynup, Norman Road and Lowry Road. So I've got the three road frontages to this proposal. And I've only got one question, and my question is, has the applicant, Kingston Rest, received Shire approval for their existing sheep feedlot operations on the plains? If so, when was it approved and what are the conditions? Thank you.
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through the Shire President, thank you Mr Kitchen for the question. There are a number of approvals over time for existing facilities and existing operations on the lot. If any community members feel there is non-compliant activities being undertaken, then we request that these are formally lodged with the Shire.
Sorry, could you repeat that? We can't hear you down here. Sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. The response was there are a number of approvals over time of existing facilities and existing operations on the lot. If any community members believe there are non-compliant activities being undertaken, then these should formally be lodged with the Shire.
Thank you. Mrs. Donna Brown.
Good evening, councillors, CEO and staff. My two questions this evening are on the intensive sheep feedlot. WA Agriculture Minister Alana McTiernan recently announced the proposal to phase out conventional battery hen cages by 2036. Supermarket chains will start phasing out caged eggs in 2023, next year, and by 2025, most large-scale retailers will not be accepting caged eggs. It was stated that the WA government was, quote, committed to animal welfare standards that reflect modern science and community standards. Now to August 2022, where an intensive sheep feedlot on the wet and windy plains outside Boynup has been proposed, rejected by the councillors, with the refusal now being challenged before the regional JDAP. On an animal welfare basis, why are confined pen sheep any different to caged hens? It is in fact the intensive caging of 250,000 sheep per annum, shorn, confined in a raised and open-sided shed, penned in a small yard for a month or more. How will our residents and the broader community be accepting of this when the phasing out of caged hens has been discussed for the last 7 years and will now in fact happen over the next decade? Consumers are now looking more closely at how their food is produced at all stages of the supply chain. If there's also the same public pressure against confined sheep as battery hens, it's very probable that the end suppliers may reject accepting any sheep kept under these conditions. In December 2021, I asked questions at the Shire meeting in relation to animal welfare and was advised it was not a planning consideration. I've contacted the RSPCA on several occasions and the people I spoke to were not aware of this proposal. Respectfully, I'm not satisfied that the matter of animal welfare has been satisfactorily considered and addressed because there has been no detailed plan of the internal proposed sheds, even with the revised application. I very simply deem this holding of animals to be cruel and unacceptable. I fail to see from the information provided in the application how the sheep will be able to have any comfort at all, especially the unlucky ones in the outside pens exposed to the elements. Question: when reading various animal welfare policies, the applicant has not provided information to explain how the sheep will be contained, i.e. the size of the pens, the material used, the flooring design, grating size, or how each animal will have a comfortable resting area. How will the applicant address the following issues set out in end suppliers' animal welfare policies? Freedom from discomfort by providing an appropriate environment, including shelter and a comfortable resting area. Freedom to express normal behaviour by providing sufficient space, proper facilities, and company of the animal's own kind. Freedom from fear and distress by ensuring conditions and treatment which avoid mental suffering. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Brown. Animal welfare is important to the Shire, as expressed during the Council's original consideration of the matter. However, animal welfare regulation falls under the scope of the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development. DPIRD, as the assessing and monitoring agency, are responsible for compliance and animal welfare legislation and regulation.
Thanks. So my second question: the Shire staff may not consider animal welfare to be a planning consideration, stating, quote, matters relating to RSPCA legislation or guidelines will need to be considered by the respective agency should the Council grant development approval. I'd like to mention here that the Shire and councillors have given due consideration and considerable debate on animal welfare at the Boynup sale yards. My question: if the proposal does not meet RSPCA standards or approval, and the way the sheep are contained do not meet suppliers' stated animal welfare policies, will the Shire consider adopting a broader assessment in relation to animal planning matters? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Brown. As per my previous response, animal welfare falls under the scope that is regulated, assessed and monitored by the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development.
Yep.
The RSPCA is an independent organisation that focuses on animal welfare advocacy, education and care guidelines. However, the responsible agency does remain to be DPIRD. The Boynup sale yards were a special circumstance in that the Shire is a landholder in that matter, and so it is a factor that we could consider.
Thank you.
Mr Robert Gibbings.
Shire President, Councillors, my name's Robert Gibbings, 787 Gavins Road on the Plains. A company search of Kingston Rest Proprietary Limited shows there are several companies involved. One of these companies is Trip Investments Proprietary Limited. Please refer to the search document of which the details include. The company name, Tripe Investments Proprietary Limited. Current name, Kingston Rest Proprietary Limited. Capital of 971,000 Australian dollars. Sales per year of approximately $447 million. Employees, more than 500. Are we really dealing with a family farm feedlot operation? My question: who is building, financing and operating this proposed intensive roofed sheep feedlot on the Plains? My second question: Which of these companies will be responsible for the compliance issues that this sheep feedlot proposal will undoubtedly create in the future?
Thank you, Mr Gibbings. The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President. Thank you, Mr Gibbings. The Shire has and will continue to assess the application provided by the applicant. Circumstances of the corporate structure, financing and other operating activities are not matters that the Shire has the authority to assess. Future compliance of any approved local activity will be the responsibility of the Shire and applicable external agencies. This will be undertaken directly with the local applicants if approved.
Thank you.
Mrs Jennifer Gibbings.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. Following neighbours' submissions to the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation Works approval application in late 2020, an internal road has been constructed on lot 801 with a crossing entry point from Gavins Road very near the corner of lot 801. All heavy vehicles, that is trucks and other vehicles, will have access to the proposed intensive sheep feedlot facilities, entering and exiting onto Gavins Road at this point. Has this crossing entry point from Gavins Road and the internal road on 801 been given approval? If so, what were the conditions, considering such as the crossover point, the setback from the internal boundary fence, sealing of the road and proximity to the single lane bridge on Gavins Road?
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President. The application is yet to be assessed by the Development Assessment Panel. This element is still to be considered by the Shire as part of the Responsible Authority report, and no final position has yet been reached.
Thank you. Question 2. Information from the DWA website referenced states the Ginnedup Brook catchment is located in the East Geograph catchment and consists of two major tributaries, Trent Creek and Ginnedup Brook. With the exception of state forest in the upper catchment, most of the catchment is cleared for agricultural use. A survey in 2009 by the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation found freshwater shrimp, the western minnow, blue spot goby, nightfish, jilgi, and the long neck turtle. Ginnedup Brook is of cultural heritage significance, and 3 registered sites of significance are found in the catchment. The name Ginnedup Brook means good campground near water, emphasising the importance of this waterway to the Aboriginal people. What are the 3 registered sites of the cultural heritage significance? What are the 3 registered sites of cultural heritage significance to be found in the Ginnedup Brook catchment? And how is the Shire of Capel involved in protecting and preserving the Ginnedup Brook catchment? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Gibbings. In relation to the 3 registered sites of cultural significance, we'll have to take that part of the question on notice, as we haven't been able to locate that just yet. To the other part of your question, the proposal will be comprehensively assessed by the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation as the assessing agency as part of any approval process, and if the application is approved, will need to comply with all DWA requirements and conditions in regard to the management of surface water and groundwater infiltration.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs Rose King.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Rose King, 785 Gavins Road, Elgin. Regarding the proposed indoor sheep feedlot, on page 24 of the Katira Environment Report, that is part of the development application material for the proposed intensive sheep feedlot, it states that the induction shed will operate as a feedlot shed in the first instance until the feedlot sheds are built, and the induction shed in the first instance will operate to induct animals and also to feed them to commercial completion. It is likely to operate in this manner for between 1 and 3 years, depending on the completion of the feedlot sheds. the overall development should be completed within 5 years. Given that the Department of Water and Environmental Regulations Works approval conditions includes composting infrastructure of a compost pad, controlled drainage area and an evaporation dam, and that a licence will be needed to operate the shed feedlotting activities. Where will the deceased sheep of the proposed intensive sheep feedlot in the first instance be disposed of? And are the carcasses of the existing feedlot operation being disposed of in a composting area that meets compliance? And if so, what are those conditions?
Thank you, Mrs. King. There are facilities currently on the farm and will continue to be used within the current operation. Should the proposal be approved, the new facilities and arrangements will be needed to support the new operation in line with DWARE guidelines.
Shouldn't they already be in the proposal for the induction shed? As the new ones haven't been built yet?
They would need to be included as new facilities as part of the new operation, which will be included as part of DWARE conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jeff Willis.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity. My name's Jeff Willis, 303 Summerley Road. If you'll just bear with me for a moment, I need to have a little few minutes. Simply because this morning I had a phone call from a guy on the point of...
Mr. Willis, you've submitted a question, and I'll need you to remain onto that, please.
Yeah, well...
There's a lot of questions here tonight, and we've got a lot to get through.
It's stuff that you guys have approved in this room, and you do not realise the ramifications of those things. Where a guy rings you because he can't sleep, and he's got to shift his kids into town.
Mr. Willis, I will need you to get to your question, please.
Throughout the application of the proponent has referred to on many occasions the existing of a feedlot of both cattle and sheep that already exists on the property, implies that Kingston Rest has been operating this for many years. After asking all the existing neighbours as to whom and when they had been informed by the Shire that the proponent had applied for the authorisation to operate the feedlot, none of them had ever been informed that the Shire had received an application to operate on this site. It appears that the general opinion within this application and other instances within the Shire is that it is better to beg forgiveness than to ask permission. Instead of the applicant applying for permission, they just go ahead and do what they want. This is a blatant disregard of the process that the Shire has been charged to administer, with little or no respect to the neighbours or the impact on their actions have on of many of them or the environment. On page 5 of the DWARE decision report, section 4, other approvals, it states that the Shire advises that the feedlot is a land use defined by its town planning scheme as stock feedlot, any building, enclosure, yard or paddock in which livestock are kept for reasons associated with rearing, breeding or fattening of livestock for the purpose of trade, commercial reward or gain at the stock rate in excess of the common and rural pursuits operating in the locality. The current feedlot operation exceeds the common rate of stocking in the locality. My question is, taking all this into consideration, can the Shire please inform me as to when the proponent applied to the Shire and was given permission to operate the existing feedlot? And if in fact he has not been applied for and been granted, why has the Shire not enforced its own town planning scheme?
Thank you, Mr. Willis. The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President. As per our previous answer, there have been a number of approvals over time of existing facilities and existing operation. In relation to non-compliance, if any community members believe there are non-compliant activities being undertaken, they should be formally lodged with the Shire. A building permit was issued in October 2020 for the buildings identified in the current development application as a shearing shed, induction shed and wool shed for use in conjunction with the existing land use and operation.
Sorry, that doesn't answer my question at all, I'm afraid. Question 2 on page 25 of Conterra Environmental Revision 5th of June 2022, section 4.2, visibility amenity. It states that the applicant has identified the location of the 10 nearest neighbours and considers the remnant and planted and roadside vegetation as greens of development so that it will not be seen from neighbouring properties. This was possibly the case when the original proposal was put forward, but that has changed dramatically with the proposal of a massive 256 metre by 56 metre to be erected, shed to be meted across 2 locations adjacent to Norman Road. Norman Road is a public surveyed road and not being closed off by the Shire. That being the case, anybody can get within 20 to 30 metres of the intended massive shed. This in itself could be a very big issue when protesters realise that the shed is nothing more than a battery farm for sheep and take action opposing this type of farming. This 256 metre shed changes the buffer zones and also encroaches upon further onto the neighbours' properties, with one neighbour's home being only 2 metres outside the buffer zone, which is contrary to section 1.1, 1.2, 2 and 2.1 of the West Australian Planning Commission Statement of Planning Policy number 41, State Industrial Buffer Policy. My question is, with regard to Norman Road, is it the intention to close it off so that the visual impact is minimised to the public and that the public can be kept away from these buildings? And will the Shire direct their representatives on the hearing to vote against the proposal, as was the case in the December meeting?
Thank you, Mr Willis. There are no plans to close Norman Road. The Shire's responsible authority report is being finalised and will be presented for consideration to the Development Assessment Panel.
Thank you.
No further questions received on notice. Are there any questions from the floor? Oh, sorry, Ms Donna Brown on behalf of Michael Titchmont. Sorry, I did miss him.
Thank you. Good evening again, and thank you for your time. I have 2 questions from Michael Titchbomb on the intensive sheep feedlot. Michael's question this evening is on behalf of the LCDC regarding nutrient levels generated in the Capel River catchments. It has been well documented that there is substantial nutrient enrichment in the streams of the catchment area entering Geograph Bay, and high nutrient loads will have an adverse effect on the growth of seagrass there. Seagrass, as we know, is a great absorber of carbon, and any plant that absorbs carbon must be protected. Seagrass captures carbon up to 35 times faster than tropical rainforests, and even though it only covers 0.2% of the seafloor, it absorbs an amazing 10% of the ocean's carbon each year, making it an incredible tool in the fight against climate change. The Geograph Bay supports the most extensive seagrass meadows in temperate WA with 10 different species of seagrass. Without management intervention, nutrient loads flowing into the Geograph Bay are predicted to increase through agricultural intensification and urbanisation, putting seagrass meadows at risk. In June 2021, GeoCatch released a report with key findings across 8 sites. It was called the Annual Keep Watch Seagrass Monitoring. Some key findings in that report. Number 3, nutrient concentration varied slightly across years and sites, and the main difference is 2 times higher nitrogen content at Capel compared to all other sites, indicating higher loads of nutrients reaching seagrasses at Capel. Finding number 4, a higher nitrogen isotope signal at Capel suggests that nitrogen derived from animal wastes, septic tanks, or from natural vegetation is also a main source. Another quote, the only site over the last 10 years that has consistently stood out from other sites is Capel, with higher nitrogen content. How would this directly relate to an intensive sheep feedlot on the plains? Hydrology of the catchment has been extensively modified as a result of the long history of agriculture in the Plains area. The catchment contains many artificial drains and natural tributaries to alleviate waterlogging in the winter months. Some of these are known to occur on the applicant's property. Water from the Plains locality flows into the Ginnadup Brook, but it also flows into the Tren Creek due to the connection between the two systems of the Elgin Main Drain, which was constructed in 1958. The nutrient load on the Capel waterway is already far too high and needs urgent action for recovery. Placing an intensive sheep feedlot in the catchment, no matter how careful the operator is, will only exacerbate the nutrient levels in both the Ginnadup Brook and Tren Creek, which flow into the Capel River. And these river systems directly impact on the seagrass in the Geograph Bay. If the intensive sheep feedlot is permitted, nutrient levels can only increase. Michael's question is, prior to the LCD submission, was the Shire aware of the high nutrient levels at the Capel River monitoring point in the Geograph Bay? And what plans does the Shire have to monitor both of these major tributaries and enforce a recovery plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. The proposal will be comprehensively assessed by the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation as the assessing agency as part of any works approved, and that the application will need to comply with DWARE requirements and conditions in regard to the management of surface water and ground infiltration. From a Shire point of view, we do have a representative on council that participates in geocache meetings, which do work towards looking at how we can manage our river systems better in the whole Geograph Bay area.
Thank you. Michael's second question this evening is also on behalf of the Capel LCDC and is an attempt to clarify the potential mortality rate of the proposed intensive sheep feedlot. In the application, under the two sections for mortality rate and disposal of dead animals in a compost pad, it is claimed that there will be an annual mortality rate of 0.4%, declining to 0.2% when fully operational. Based on a throughput of 250,000 animals per year, there would be approximately 1,000 deceased animals to dispose of. We refer to a recent CSRO document published in December 2021, where responses from 59 current lamb feedlotters were sought, and it advised a mortality was a median of 1%, not 0.4. Using the CSRO's average of 1% mortality on 250,000 sheep, this equates to an annual mortality rate of 2,500, which is a substantial increase from the suggested 1,000 in the proposal. We would like to question how the rate of mortality of 0.4% was arrived at, because the median of 1% in the CSIRO report more than doubles that death rate. This is significant. It has an impact on the calculations for the composting facility in this application. How has the applicant arrived at the annual mortality rate of 0.4 and is able to anticipate a suggested further decline to 0.2% when fully operational, which differs greatly from the recent CSIRO report? If the mortality rate is the applicant's own estimate, how can this be verified? What government agency advised the applicant on this matter, or have government agencies relied on the applicant's own percentage? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. The figure of 0.4% was based on Meat and Livestock Australia's data. The figure of 0.2% is based on the landowner's data. The higher figure has been used as the basis for all calculations. All right, they were the questions we received on notice. Are there any questions from the floor? No, I'll move to applications for leave of absence. Are there any applications? Councillor McCleary? Are there any other applications? Can I get a mover for that? Councillor Sciano Is there a seconder? Councillor Andrew. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Declarations of interest for tonight. Councillor Rosina Mogg on 14.1 proximity interest, the Hastings Road tender for curbing and resurfacing. A impartiality interest from myself on 14.4, the temporary closure of Salter Road. Councillor Peter McCleary on item 14.5, the execution of the federal grant for Minnenut Bridge is impartiality. And Councillor Kieran Noonan on 14.7, the request for reconsideration of the Boar resolutions, Bumouter Ring Road resolutions, that's an impartiality interest. Item 7, there are no items to be discussed behind closed doors. We now move to 8.1, confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Council on the 27th of July 2022. Is there a mover for those minutes? Councillor Andrew. Is there a seconder? Councillor Terrantroy. Councillor Andrew. Discussion. Councillor Terrantroy. Anything on those minutes? Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. On item 15.1 in there, I was a seconder to the motion, and because of the adjournment of the meeting, I wasn't in attendance to when the item was discussed, and I'm hoping that was recorded in those.
That's reflected in those minutes, Councillor. Any further comments? Councillor Andrew, anything to close? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Announcements by the presiding person without discussion. I just have one. We have in the council 2 members and 2 proxy members of the Development Assessment Panel. The Development Assessment Panel has a code of conduct. Those guidelines are available on the WA Government website. I'd like to bring attention to clause 2.4.5, which details that a DAP member must not participate in a discussion with an applicant formally or informally, or the public in respect to a development application that is before the relevant DAP. With this in mind, as you can appreciate, it would be inappropriate for any council DAP representative to respond to and or communicate with, verbally or by email or in correspondence, regarding any proposed DAP assessment that is proposed. Any information about that can be directed to the DAP Secretariat, which can be contacted on 08 6551 9919. Now move to item 10, petitions, deputation and presentations. There are none. There are no motions of which previous notice has been given, and there are no questions of which previous notice has been given. We now move to items 13, Chief Executive Officer reports. 13.1, the Shire of Capel adoption of the corporate business plan for 2022 to 2026. Is there a mover? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's important to note that the business plan feeds into all the budgetary processes, and it's quite comprehensive. It looks into our future plans, and it helps with setting future budgets as such. It's a very comprehensive report, and I commend this report to the meeting. Thanks.
Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, President. I'd just like to concur with what Councillor McCleary has just said. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the item? Speakers for? Any discussion? Councillor McCleary, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. One thing I was going to close with is accepting these plans means we're taking ownership of the Shire's direction going forward. This includes the financial course of actions and where we're heading with staffing in those items. So I'd like to put the item to the vote.
With that, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? And those against? And that's carried 7-1. Item 13.2, Walga Local Government Convention for 2022 and the Annual General Meeting. There's an officer's recommendation, but there are blank names. We'll get a mover and a seconder, so it's on the table first, and then we can suspend standing orders and have discussion. So, mover, Councillor Noonan. Seconder, Councillor Sciano. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to move the motion as per the officer's recommendation and move to the filling in of the councillor, the names.
Councillor Sciano. Do you want to suspend it?
Yeah, just move suspend standing orders so that and I will have to off the top of my head. Do we know which one is it?
10.1.
Yeah, so move to suspend standing orders 10.1.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Andrew. I'll put that to the vote. That's carried. Unanimous. All right, so we're in suspend standing orders. Nominations to become voting delegates were received from Councillor Terrantroy and Councillor Mogg. Are there any other councillors wishing to nominate? Are there any members wishing to put themselves down as a proxy? Councillor Sciano. Councillor Noonan. Okay, so we've got those there. Is there any further nominations for those positions? All right.
Move to reinstate standing orders 10.1.
Seconder, Councillor Andrew. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. So those names that were mentioned, if the mover and seconder consent to those additions, we can populate those right now.
What do you want me to move it as amendment because I'm still talking? I might have to move it as amendment.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. President. Just continuing my right response as a seconder, I'm going to move an amendment to insert Councillor Mogg in the first blank space, Councillor Terrantroy in the second blank space, and then in point 2, insert myself, Councillor Sciano, in the first blank space, and then Councillor Noonan in the second blank space for point 2.
We'll just get that up on the board first. Happy with that? Is there a seconder to that amendment? Councillor Andrew. Councillor Sciano, do you wish to speak to your amendment?
No, thank you.
Councillor Andrew. Any discussion on that amendment? To close. I'll put that amendment to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. That becomes the substantive motion. We return to the seconder who still has the call.
I don't think there's much to say here. I've been myself in, I think, 2018. I think it's a fantastic opportunity. It'd be great to see Councillor Terran-Troy there for the first time. Hope it's enjoyable. I've taken a lot back from that before, and happy to cover for anyone if they are sick.
Is anyone wishing to speak against it? Any discussion on the item? Councillor Noonan, anything to close?
No, thanks, Mr. President. No, just that I think it is a great opportunity. I think it's important that Capel is represented there, and I think that our two representatives would do a great job. So I hope that they enjoy the conference. Thank you.
I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Sorry, I just didn't see. Do that again. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Item 13.3, Committees of Council Minutes. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Sciano. The seconder, Councillor McCleary. The Deputy President.
I don't think I need to say much here. They're confirmed minutes. Following from the discussion at previous council meeting, they're confirmed minutes, so I don't think it's of council's I don't think it would be up to council to change or amend those in any way other than to just note them.
Councillor McCleary. Any discussion on that item? Councillor Sciano, to close. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Item 14.1, Tender 22/07, Hastings Road Curbing and Drainage. Councillor Mogg has declared a proximity interest and will leave the room for consideration of this item. All right, is there a mover for the item? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Noonan. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think this is an overdue piece of work. It's probably been setting aside for part of the Bunbury Outer Ring Road when Hasty Road was originally going to be the arterial connection to it. Things have changed over history, and I a bit set back by the pricing, but that's what the economic environment's like this day. So yeah, I think it's a well overdue piece of work along that section of road and should improve its outlook.
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with Councillor McCleary. I think it's well overdue. It's the main entrance to the third largest population centre in the Shire. It's the entry point for the Bunbury Cathedral Grammar, which is the largest employer in the Shire, and for many, many buses, many, many cars, as parents for over 1,000 students drop those kids off every day and pick them up every afternoon. So I think it is time that that road was done, and I'm very pleased with the Carboni brothers tender and the work that they have done, and they've shown in places like Ramsey Road that they can do a really good job. So we're looking forward to having that tender accepted and the work getting done. So I commend the officer's recommendation.
Anyone to speak against? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. While I agree that the entrance to Jallura needs some updating and some cleaning up and rectification of curbing and drainage, I believe that more appropriate funds would be coming from roads funding. Very rarely does council receive funding that isn't tied to any specific area or that we can spend however we want. And I just feel that these funds would be or could be utilised better to the benefit of the broader community, such as disability beach access. I can't support spending this amount of untied funds to updating Hastings Road, unfortunately.
Speakers for, or Councillor Clues, question?
Thank you. Pardon me. Yeah, so I just want to clarify, as I remember it, I think it was about 18 months ago we agreed to do these works from some grant funding. So Council's already supportive of getting the work done. Just curious now, with the prices having risen on the works, how much of this work will be done from grant funding and how much are we going to have to cover out of our pocket?
Outline on page 31, there is a table there about the funding sources. So of the total estimated 492,000 to complete the project, 271 is coming from the federal government grant. 126 is coming from a carryover from the Shire of Capel's car park budget. Further 8,000 is coming from the Shire of Capel's annual budget, which we adopted last month, and $85,000 is being contributed from Main Roads WA.
Great, thank you. I just wanted that clarified. Thank you very much.
Are there any other speakers for the item? Councillor Tarrant-Roy.
Yeah, I'm just wanting to acknowledge that I've been contacted by a number of residents, one by email and a couple by phone, and people that I bumped into, and they're quite pleased that we're going to be doing, especially the drainage issues on Hastings, and to make the this is coming to council, I should say, because it hasn't been voted on yet. Yeah, so I've had some positive feedback from the community, which is very helpful, I think. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? No. Councillor McCleary, you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. Look, I reiterate that, yeah, it's a worthwhile piece of work that has to be done, and concur with the councillors that spoke for this item. And as pointed out by the President, there is a list of where all the funding comes from, page 31 in the agenda, which will also be in the minutes. So that's it.
I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That's carried 6-1. We'll just wait for Councillor Mogg to return to the chamber. We now move to item 14.2, RFT 22-09, turf maintenance for the sporting fields 2022 to 2025. There's a recommendation there. Is there a mover for it? Councillor Tarrant-Roy. Is there a seconder? Councillor McCleary. Councillor Tarrant-Roy.
Yes, I'd just like to move the officer's recommendation. I think this is a really good move because it's going to save us money in the long run, and with the planning of the having the turf renovation program, we will have the turf replaced at a time when it's optimal to do so, and we won't be searching for someone to do it on a year-by-year basis. So I commend this officer's recommendation, and I'm going to be supporting it, and I implore my fellow councillors to support it.
Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. Originally, when I saw this, I was a bit surprised that it was a 3-year contract and without rise and fall, given the current thing, but I got a couple of answers on that. look, I think it's worthwhile. I've had people contact me from sporting clubs about the turf maintenance and items like that, so I think it's good getting a bit of continuity on who's going to do it. I can only hope that it's a good outcome in the long term over the next couple of years.
Is there anyone to speak against the item? Speakers for? No. Councillor Tarrant, wish to close? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Item 14.3, request for tender 22-05, electrical services panel. Is there a mover for that one? Councillor McCleary. A seconder. Councillor Tarantroy. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I probably got that wrong. This is the 3-year term one that had the rise and fall issues that I was thinking about. But look, I think it's a good outcome to secure a electrical contractor for a term, because it's very hard to get services in the current economic climate. So I think this is a good outcome, and it'll give some continuity to the work.
Councillor Tarantroy.
Yes, I concur with Councillor McCleary. I think it's really important to engage an electrical services panel to ensure that the above risks are minimalised, and I'm talking about the safety. So, yeah, I think it's great. It's about health and safety. It's about making sure that infrastructure and systems utilities are licensed, are looked after by a licensed contractor, and also to have the safety checks and repairs that we need. So yes, I think this is a really good move, because as we know, tradesmen are really hard to come by, and if we have someone in contract, under contract, and with other backups as well, this will keep our Shire facilities safer for our residents.
Is there a speaker against? Any discussion? Question, Councillor Clues?
Thank you, yes. Will the contract include a out-of-hours call-out access?
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Yes, it will include a out-of-hours call-out.
Brilliant, thank you kindly.
Is there any discussion? Anything I just want to say a few words. I think it's great to the process of trying to establish this panel. It's probably a move I want to see happen to all of our regular contractors in this matter, to have a bit of a pool. We can use contractors out of a more of a fixed rate rather than being subject to a random invoice. But what I really like about this particular contractor, if I could say that, is that they are a local business, local to the Shire, so it's great to see that, so really happy about it. All right, if there's no other discussion, I'll move back to Councillor McCleary just to close. All right, well, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Item 14.4, the temporary closure of a thoroughfare through Salter Road. I've declared an impartiality interest in the item, yet. All right, is there a mover for the item? Councillor Sciano. A seconder? Councillor McCleary. The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's one of those things that you look at in hindsight and you think, how had that ever been allowed to continue for so long? I imagine it would have always been a liability to Walsall to have a live road reserve where people could use to travel through a site, particularly one of such contention and of risk. It's a work site at times. And I mean, some of the commentary I've seen around, or discussion in the community around this, has been understanding where the truck movements will go. And I'm, having had those conversations with staff, quite happy with the plan. Obviously, the light vehicles, get people visiting the site and whatnot will go will still access through Payne Street, but it won't make any difference to truck movements because trucks shouldn't be accessing through Payne Street because of the RAV rating anyway, and they should have always been accessing the site from the south. So, I mean, with the south site access still remaining open to truck movements and the Payne Street access, the north access still remaining open to light vehicles, I think this is probably the correct solution, and obviously the gate in the middle for emergency situations. So, yeah, I'm completely happy with it. I think it is a liability. I think this is just another small step in improving the buoyant up sale yards and what we have at the moment. So obviously commend this to council.
Councillor McCleary.
Not much more to add, but I did note in some of the submissions that there was a bit of clarity sought on traffic management, which Councillor Shire already discussed. Maybe that's something going forward where we can show a bit better plan of how the traffic management's working, even though people, with the trucks and stuff, we know that they've got to go that way, but it's probably something that might help with people's understanding of the movements around the sale yards.
All right, is anyone wishing to speak against the item? Speakers for. Councillor Tarantroy.
Yeah, look, I'm for anything that increases health and safety of the residents and public accessing the site. I think you're removing a traffic hazard with collisions with trucks reversing and things like that. And also, I think by giving the opportunity over to Walter to manage the site and to mitigate the council's risk of accidents is a really great move for public safety. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Sciano, you wish to close?
I'll just say, though Microsoft Bing is probably not the map system you should use, it actually, there are sources that show that Salter Road is a road that connects from Payne Street to Trigwell. And so out of hours, people using this as a thoroughfare to travel between those two communities two streets going through what is a work site at the end of the day is a huge liability. So obviously commend the motion.
I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Item 14.5, execution of the federal grant agreement replacement of Minnenup Bridge. Councillor McCleary has declared an impartiality interest. Just for the benefit of the gallery and those listening online, there is an amended officer's recommendation, which now includes a point 3. That third point reads, authorises the Shire President and Chief Executive Officer to execute and enter a memorandum of understanding with Geograph Property Proprietary Limited, a subsidiary of Cedar Woods Properties Limited, on behalf of the Shire of Capel regarding the project management of the Minnenup Bridge replacement by affixing their signatures and the Shire of Capel common seal. Okay. Is there a mover for that item? Councillor Tarantroy. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor Tarantroy.
Thank you. Look, again, I think this is a really good motion. I think the officer's recommendation covers it all. It's about allowing the council to the council staff to get on with the business, and by doing this, we can allow the process to happen smoothly without having to come back to council. Thank you.
The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I mean, this is a unique one. I don't think I've seen this in my time in council, but it's been a productive relationship. The Shire has basically acted as a broker for the grant in this situation. So there's no upfront cost to the Shire in regards to the actual infrastructure itself. I mean, there's obviously some views and contention around the future needs and future traffic flow of Minnenut Road and the impacts on Stratham. But in the short term, the truth is that we have a approved subdivision, and I remember it coming to council at Cedar Woods, and this is obviously important to ensuring safe access and up to standard access on that road to be able to cater for the short-term growth, let alone the future growth. It's obviously an asset that at time will need renewal, and I think it's quite close to the end of its asset life as it is. And I think one of the many things you'll learn in local government is that bridges are damn expensive. So it's a very unique situation to be in, where we've managed to broker a grant for the renewal of a bridge, a very expensive asset, to facilitate planned growth that we've already approved as a local government. So, as unique as it is, glad to see it's played out the way that it has. There obviously is risk of costs to the Shire in the future around the connections of the roads on either side of the bridge. They're our assets. But to have someone come to the table and renew this asset and upgrade it as well is great news.
Are there any speakers against the item? Councillor Andrew. Sorry, I thought you were asking a question. Was it a question or?
I have a question, but it might be a point of order actually. The mover hasn't actually clarified what they've moved here, but I noticed that the alternative recommendation is the one that's popped up on the screen, so...
Yes, it was the updated officer's recommendation. It's been moved, yes.
Okay.
Yep. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. I'd like to see some safety and increased traffic. The upgrading of the bridge and connecting Minnenut Road through is going to create some safety and increased traffic issues on the roads owned by the Shire, and I'd like to see some mitigation options with costings so that we can be proactive rather than reactive, and we know what those future costs are going to look like. I'd also have liked to have seen some real community consultation before we go ahead and embark on such a large project. So I'll be voting against the motion.
Is there a speaker for? Councillor McCleary.
This bridge, while it's existing, will eventually be a connecting system to Dalyalup, and with the outcome of the Bunbury Outer Ring Road will be a secondary exit for the people of Stratham, so I think it's going to be playing a very important role in land development in the future.
Is there any other discussion on the item? No. Councillor Tarantroy, wish to close? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? And those against? That's carried 5-3. Okay, move to item 14.6, nomination of new road names, roads affected by the Bunbury Outer Ring Road. The item was deferred from the 27th of July 22 Ordinary Council meeting. The item has already been moved and seconded by Councillor Clues and Noonan. I do not believe either has spoken to the item. So, Councillor Clues, you have the call as the mover.
Reserve.
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was wondering if I could, with the approval of the mover, move the officer's recommendation with an amendment.
If it doesn't substantially alter, yes.
Well, the amendment is this. It's to remove everything after "and" from item 1. So basically to remove item 2, the former delegation to the CEO to approve or for the reinstatement of that delegation number in terms of the naming. And if I could perhaps explain the reasoning for that.
Yeah, you just have to wait for it to be. So you're seeking to remove point 2. Does the mover consent to those changes?
Yes.
And that becomes substantive, so the seconder, you can speak from then on.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it's important that we give that this is an important motion, and I think that it's important that we give those residents living on those roads which are to be renamed, that we give them the comfort, the reassurance that any changes that are made, that they will be looked after in appropriate time for them to have any documentation changed that they need to get changed, and so on and so forth, so they've got plenty of time to do that. So it's an important motion. If the ball goes ahead, this has to happen. The reason for removing item 2 is not that I have any lack of confidence in the CEO's ability to fulfil that delegation, but and in fact I would endorse that delegation to be reinstated for the CEO for all other roads in the Shire. However, in this instance, because it's related to the bore, I very much appreciate the comments that that are in the officer's recommendation and the background below, that community consultation will take place. I think that's critical. That's very, very important that that happens. But the only reason for saying in this instance I think that the delegation shouldn't be reinstated just yet is because I think this should come back to council. I think I know that the CEO and I know that the staff at the Shire will do a very good job, as they always have done, in consulting with the community, and I appreciate the input from community members who do that. But because of the nature of this particular road, I think it's important that this comes back to council, and that councillors be required to vote on this. And certainly when it does come back, it will come back with recommendations that the staff have made, but it's important that I think that we put our names to that just for this item. That's my reasoning for that amendment.
Is there anyone to speak against the item? Councillor Tarantroy?
Like taking out number 2.
It's not an amendment, that's the substantive, without the point 2.
So, yeah, so I'm speaking against it because it's without number 2. So I think, and the reason being, it will slow the process down. I mean, I've read all the background information and I'm concerned that by taking away Delegation 125, it delays obtaining the approvals for the road names that the community selects. And I agree that the community has to be involved. And this will happen if the bore is delayed or stopped, this of course won't happen. So, however, I don't want to delay something that the community is going to get on board with and be a part of. So if the delegation is there, I think it just will quicken the process and make it more comfortable for residents because they know what's going on and it's not going to be delayed. So I implore people to vote. I implore my fellow councillors to vote against this motion. Thank you.
Is there any other speakers? Councillor Sciano?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to point out on page 66, my impression has that the intentions of the CEO and staff has always been to bring back a report to council following the consultation process with the community. So I don't. I'm happy. Look, I'm happy with the motion. I don't know if the moved alternative motion actually changes the outcome much at all. So, because I was always going off the basis that there would, and as per that timeline, a 28-day consultation period, a time for review and report, and then return to council depending on the next available OCM. And then there is some, there's actually a time frame there as well with Landgate and their review and the allowance of renegotiation and unapproved names, and advise Main Roads WA of the approved names, and then the period of time that it will take them to install. So I think I completely agree, given the situation with the Bunbury Outer Ring, the community's involvement with the road and how contentious of an issue it has been. This should come back to council to be discussed, and council should make the final decision, obviously, on what those road names are after the community consultation has taken place. I just had a one question. The actual delegation itself, 125, I believe may have already been reinstated in a previous item in reviewing delegations. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yep.
the delegation 125 was reinstated by the council in March. May was it?
Okay. So then my next question is, I think this item came in July. But that's right. Yeah, sorry. So this had been, so since this originally came to council, that delegation has been reinstated, and now we have a motion which we have in front of us. The delegation is reinstated, but the report obviously says adoption, to come back for adoption. I mean, it wouldn't hurt to add an amendment and have simply that report come back to council. Your eyes are lighting up, Councillor Clues.
So is that an amendment, Councillor?
Yes, amend to add a point 2. The report come to council following community consultation.
Is that how you wish your amendments to be written?
I think that achieves the desired outcome.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Clues? Councillor Sciano?
I think just quite simply to put everyone's mind at ease, having the delegation reinstated, this just obviously requests and requires staff to bring that report back to council for consideration, and I think that's, from the discussion that's been had tonight, I think that's the intention of my fellow councillors, and the amendment will assist.
Councillor Clues.
Thank you. This was a bit of a Seinfeld episode. As I understand it, we've basically talked so far about all the things that we all intended on doing anyway, so, but you're right, it is nice to have it clarified in the item, so I'm glad to see the amendment. Looking forward to moving on with this one.
Is there a question?
So my question relates to will there be enough time if from today's date, the 31st, we only have 293 working days to complete statutory actions before Woods Road would be closed, redirected, if the closure ends in October 2023? So that's, I'm looking at the table on page 66. Taking approximately 200 days with only 93 days spare. Will that give us time, if we have any further delays, to meet the statutory requirements and not run out of time? And that was why I spoke to it in the first place, taking it out. So I know it's a long question, but do you understand my question?
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President. Councillor, part of it is a statutory time frame, the other parts are not necessarily statutory time frames. So the 200 days is a reasonable amount of time. The most important part about, I guess, getting on with it is allowing some surety for the residents in terms of their street naming and their street numbering, and also for surety around emergency services going to the right place when they need to. So we're confident with that time frame and that we can achieve those tasks in that time.
Question, Councillor Andrew. Excuse me.
Can I just confirm through the chair to Councillor Sciano that his intention is that report comes to council before the names are changed, rather than a report telling us what rows have been changed to what?
The Deputy President.
Well, that's why I included the term following community consultation. So I expect that would be the report with the findings of the community consultation for council's endorsement.
Councillor Clues.
The Deputy President would have permission by the seconder to modify his amendment if he so wished.
We've gone past that point because the other people have asked questions. Is there any speakers for or against the amendment? Question, Councillor McCleary.
Given that the road's under construction, what kind of time frame do we have before these roads are severed, and we really need to have some sort of continuity to people that might be living on these roads to having a name for it? And because that's some of the concerns that were raised in the
I wouldn't be aware of those
process.
timelines. The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President, the discussions that we've had with Main Road Southern Gateway is that I guess as construction continues or is expected to continue, temporary road closures might occur and also sort of diversions might occur, but the time frame that we've indicated is in time before there's a permanent cessation or closure of some of these roads.
Another question?
Yeah, follow-up question. So I looked through this time frame and looking at scheduling and all that. This is a worst case scenario time frame.
All right, any further questions or discussion on the amendment? Councillor Sciano, do you wish to close your amendment? I'll put that amendment to the vote. Those in favour? It's carried unanimous. That becomes part of the substantive motion, which we've returned to. Are there any further speakers for or against the item? No. Councillor Clues, do you wish to close? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. We now move to item 14.7, request for reconsideration of the Bunbury Outer Ring Road resolutions. The item was deferred at the July 2022 meeting following a previous deferral before that. The item was originally moved by Councillor Kitchen, myself, and seconded by former Councillor Scott. As the mover, I've already spoken to the item. The seconder is no longer a member of the council, so discussion opens to the floor. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was wondering, we've been going for an hour and a half now. I was wondering if we could have a 5 or 10 minute adjournment just to give people a little bit of a break.
Yes, I'll adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes. We will reconvene at 7:37. All right, if everyone could resume their seats, please, we'll get the meeting back underway. So we resume back on item 14.7. Was there anyone wishing to speak to the item? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to foreshadow an alternative 14.7 if this recommendation fails.
Yes, your foreshadowed motion is up on the board there. Okay. That was distributed to councillors earlier. Should have a copy. Councillor Andrew, a question, is it?
Yes. So we've also got the amended motion from last Monday's conversation, which is adding that extra bit into point 5.
Yes.
Into the motion that's currently up on the screen. So did you want me to move that as an amendment, or what did you want me to do with that?
Yes, as this motion's already moved and seconded,
Yeah.
Those advice that's been provided to you to add that into there, you'll have to move it as an amendment.
Okay. Now?
Yep. I assumed Councillor Noonan had finished the call while I gave you the question, so yes, you can move that amendment.
All right, so the amendment is to point 5. The full stop at the end of accepted becomes a apostrophe, and it then adds in subject to the agreement of Main Roads Western Australia to a provision of an extended maintenance and warranty period covering these roads for a period of not less than 5 years post-construction. Thanks, Talia.
Is there a seconder to that motion? Councillor Sciano. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. This was just born out of the conversation from the agenda briefing session last, I want to say Monday, about the cost that's going to be incurred by the council when these arterial roads get handed over to us if the bore is completed. So this is just hopefully going to shore up some extra funds to help the Shire cover the additional costs of the maintenance of those roads and extends the warranty period out on them.
Councillor Sciano.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councillor Andrew makes a good point. If these are to happen and if they are to come, they are a cost to the local government. And I mean, the cost is in the report. Whole of life cost for these roads is $19.5 million. And that's the whole of life is judged at 60 years. So I think that we have to, on this front, make a very strong argument that there needs to be some effort by Main Roads, who will ultimately, if this does occur, force the roads upon ownership upon the Shire to try and get every dollar out of it that we can. So support the amendment.
Are there any speakers against the amendment? Speakers for? Councillor Andrew, you wish to close discussion on the amendment? I'll put the amendment to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That's carried 7-1. That becomes part of the substantive item. Are there any other speakers to the motion? Councillor McCleary.
Well, the current motion that's sitting before us is going to give the chance for the officers to go back in and negotiate some outcomes, and it's good to see that we're trying to pursue some extra dollars in the ongoing maintenance of these roads. So I think it's a good change to the original motion, and I think we should head forward with that, and hopefully we can get a little bit of outcome that we need from the building of this road.
Are there no speakers? Councillor Clues.
Thank you. Councillor Noonan has provided what I believe to be an excellent foreshadowed motion that I think is more in line with sticking to the Shire and Council's current policy position on this item. So be my recommendation to vote against this one and look forward to the foreshadowed.
Sure. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Tarantroy?
So I'm speaking for the motion, and I just want to take everyone's memory back to October 2019 when we had the special electors meeting, and the electors present rejected the motion to reroute the ball. So I will be
Point of
voting.
order.
Point of order, Councillor.
We're not debating the route of the ball, nor are we debating the outcome of a special electors meeting held in Boynup.
Yes, I agree, Councillor. We'll be a little bit more relevant to the subject here tonight.
May I ask a question?
Yes?
So my whole point was based on listening to the residents and electors. So how is that debating the ball? Because I wasn't. I was actually making my point that...
I've ruled on the matter, Councillor. It's not open for discussion. You still have the call. Are there any other members who wish to speak to the item? Councillor Noonan, you have already spoken to the item. When you foreshadowed the motion, the call then went to Councillor Andrew. I'm just trying to find the standing order which would allow you to speak twice if you wish to do so. So we can suspend the right one. That's the order of debate. Yeah, if you just... I'll just have a minute, I'll find that standing order.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Councillor.
I thought we've set aside 10.1 earlier for the purpose of having a conversation. That was the explanation we were given earlier tonight.
Yes, that removes the order of debate, and yeah. So what we need to suspend is 7.11. 7.11, which is limitation on members speaking.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. So we just need to move to suspend standing on 7.11.1. Can you do that? No. Yeah. No. So moved Councillor Sciano to suspend standing order 7.11.1. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Tarantroy. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried 6-2. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank Councillor Sciano and Tarantroy for moving that motion to give me that opportunity to present what I believe is a better option, a foreshadowed motion which I believe is a better option. The officer's recommendation that we have before us is the result of negotiations that we've had with the board team, Southern Gateway, Main Roads, and however it substantially changes the position that the Shire, the council has previously taken, where the council has been quite firm in saying that we don't believe that this is the right route for the road and that there are better options. Because of those negotiations that we've had and that position that we've taken, the Shire has been given considerably more in terms of sound walls. They've reduced the footprint of the road by shortening the batters and increasing retaining. We have achieved, well, it's in and it's out, and it's in and it's out, the shared paths. We've had improvements in the actual direction of the road, or the configuration of the road, so that it avoids significant trees. So the fact that we have not simply rolled over and said to Main Roads, yep, okay, you're bigger than us, you go for your life, has actually been a very, very good thing for the Shire. However, still the motion, or the bore as it's been presented, is an incredibly detrimental road for the Shire, given the impact that it's going to have on the single greatest natural asset that the Shire has, that corridor with those giant trees. That's the one thing that, the one unique asset that we can say, we've got this, nobody else in the world has it. It beggars belief that the state government hasn't come on board and recognised that and been more receptive to the position that the Shire has taken. However, the impact on native flora, the impact on the wetlands is also going to be great with this current bore route going over the 5 Mile Brook. One of the things that frustrates me the most as a economics teacher, as a person who's interested in the future of our children, is the impact that it has on the basalt. 13.678 million tonnes of basalt, which was not calculated by me, I got it wrong. It was calculated by the very good Shire officers that we've got here, working away very hard to try and get the best outcome for the Shire. But this is not just for the Shire, it's for the whole region. That basalt is already used all the way from Bustleton up to Harvey and everywhere in between. That basalt is critical and will be critical as years go by. We've seen in the last 3 years the enormous increase in the erosion along the coast, all the way from Bunbury, from Rockingham, all the way down to Bustleton. If that degree or that level of erosion continues, and now that the bottom of the ford dune has been eroded, the sand on top of that is going to collapse over summer as it dries out, leaving it so much more vulnerable, so that the next storm event will take out more of that dune. And we will get to the point, retreat certainly is an option, but it's probably the worst option. It's the do nothing default option. We should be doing what happens the entire length of the American East Coast, which happens the entire length of around the Netherlands, the coast there. We need to be preparing now to build retaining walls, sea mitigation walls. The way to do that is to set aside to save the resources that you need to do that. Now, a ton of basalt in the ground is worth $1 to $2.
Point of order, Councillor Clues.
Again, we're talking, this item isn't about the bore pathway, nor is it about the basalt. It's specifically about some reserves that Main Roads are requesting access to, as I read it. I think debate's gotten off track.
Yeah, in part I agree. I think Councillor Noonan is speaking to issues in that immediate area, but I will probably ask to be a bit more on time and direct with the subject. I'd also just probably notify Councillor that you're getting close to your 5 minutes. If you request another 5 minutes, we can grant you that by vote, but I can ask you for that when your 5 minutes is approaching.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Councillor Clues, for your timely reminder. Yes, this is about the granting permission for Sleaford, and that's the only little bit of the bore route that we are involved in. And the proposal that I am putting up has exactly the same, gives exactly the same delegation of authority to Main Roads. So we recognise that connection through Jules Road up to the Centenary Lilydale Road, Lilydale now, is a vital part of the bore, as it happens. However, the proposal that I have foreshadowed looks at the minimal impact on the Shire to deliver the...
You're approaching your 5 minutes. Do you...
Yeah, if I could. I'll only need
5 minutes?
Minute or two.
Sure, we'll just... Yeah. All right, put that to the vote. Those in favour of granting an extra 5 minutes? Those against? That's carried 7-1. You may continue, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. President and Councillors. Councillor McCleary, I appreciate it as well. It's a minimal impact proposal, bore proposal that I'm suggesting. It's to have the 4-lane bore connection to Bustle Highway, which is what the bore is, the Bunbury Outer Ring Road. It's a 4-lane connection from the central bore to Bustle Highway.
Point of order.
Excuse me. Apologies. Point of order, Councillor.
I apologise, but I believe Councillor Noonan is now debating his foreshadowed motion.
Yes, I'll agree with that a little bit. Should be relevant back to the subject, please, Councillor.
So I would request that councillors vote against the motion that's on the table, and you've all had the foreshadowed motion. I hope that you've had the chance to have a look through that. I certainly hope that the state government, that the relevant ministers, Minister Plibersek, get the chance to have a look at that. That they, and I believe that it's important that as local representatives that we present the best case for the local community, and I think for the state, for the nation. It's important that we provide that guidance where we can. So I thank you very much for your indulgence, and hope that you reject the current proposal.
All right. Are there any other speakers to the item? Question, Councillor Townsbury?
Can I just ask some clarifying questions about the alternate motion?
No, it's a foreshadowed motion, so it can't be considered.
Motion, sorry.
Yeah, so it can't be considered until it's on the table. A question, Councillor Clues?
Thank you. If I may, it might be quicker than me searching it up. I'm just curious if the online version of the agenda tonight has any maps to show the drawings that are mentioned in the item, because they're not anywhere in the Docs on Tap version of the agenda.
The item had... So I'm just clarifying something. The map was emailed to councillors and it will be uploaded online shortly. Yep. Question? Councillor
No,
Scannell?
just move to reinstate Standing Order 7.11.1.
Move to restate standing orders. Is there a seconder? Councillor Clues. Put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Are there any further speakers to the item? As the mover, I'll close debate then. Look, it's certainly a issue which has polarised a lot of the community over the years, and we've had a lot of discussion around this table on the matter. And I have a lot of respect for what the community's done in the draw-up area and the members of that community who sit around this table. There's a lot of outcomes, if you could call it that. I'm sure some of the particular members of the community wouldn't call it that, that have come because in some parts at the appropriate times the council has been willing to have that discussion, to negotiate and get some less worse outcomes, I suppose. And that has, as has been pointed out, resulted in some of those significant trees being retained. Unfortunately, not all of them could be, but some of them have. It's resulted in more fauna crossings. It's resulted in better footpath accesses and amenity improvements in the area. Those are things that I'm sure a lot of people in that community would disagree are fair trade-offs of what's happened. And I've been up there and I've seen what's happening myself. And I could only imagine, because I don't live there directly, how hard that would be to watch that. But there are times when you've got to be objective and look at, well, how can we do this a bit smarter? And I'm supporting it tonight mainly because of that addition that's happened to point 5. I think that main roads do have a responsibility, that they are constructing kilometres of new road which will come under the care of the local government. And I believe as a new piece of infrastructure, which going beyond its initial capital expenditure and construction, then has a period where reseals need to be done just to maintain that initial surface before it actually then moves into a period of what I would call regular road maintenance. And I think main roads is responsible for that period of resealing it and make sure it stays in that period before it actually becomes under a general caretaker period where the local government will no doubt inherit them. So I don't want the community to see this as a back down. I think the council this doesn't change the council's position that it's had since 2019 of being opposed to that road. And I hope this isn't framed as a backing down from that, because in every conversation that I've been a part of with main roads and those that Shire officers have, the lead comment has always been that there's a significant portion of the community and the council still maintains an opposition to this, yet we work with them to try and get outcomes to make it less impactful in Jalarup. So I encourage the council to support this, because it's not turning our backs on those previous motions and on the community. It's trying to get better outcomes out of a hard situation. So I'll leave it at that. So I'll put the item to the vote. Those in favour? And those against? That's a tie vote 4-4. The item requires an absolute majority, so it lapses for that, yet a casting vote still needs to be cast, even though it won't make a difference to the outcome. I've always had a philosophy that casting votes should not be used to change fundamental principles, so my casting vote will be cast in the negative. So the item is lost 4-5. We now move to Section 15, Community and Corporate Reports. 15.1, accounts paid. Oh, sorry, yes, I forgot about that. The foreshadowed motion now is considered. Apologies for that. So that was moved, Councillor Noonan. Is there a seconder for that foreshadowed motion? Councillor Clues. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'd just like to commend you on your the fairness with and the ethics that you have applied to running the meeting. I appreciate that very much and commend you for that. Thank you. The councillors have had the opportunity to have a look at the amended motion. It does give main roads the same opportunities, the same authority that they need to work through the Sleaford Road, Jules Road connection that we've talked about. If you look at it, this is the minimal bore that's required. It is only looking to connect from the central bore across Centenary Road to the bore. It delivers the bore. It delivers that road connection. It has the least amount of impact on trees and native vegetation. It has the least amount of impact on farmland. There will be no farmland loss. In fact, there will be far less farmland impacted because of this amendment. So this amendment is not about, and if I could perhaps make the point that we received an email this afternoon about a special council meeting or a special electors meeting where a motion was put. That really doesn't apply in this instance because that motion was looking at an alternative route which would have had a major or a different impact on a different section of the community closer to Boynup. And I certainly appreciate the sentiment that was expressed at that meeting. So this route follows a section of the existing bore plan. It's simply completing the bore by going along Centenary and making that connection to Bustle Highway. Doesn't impact any farmland. Okay, it does not impact any farmland. It doesn't have any impact on Boynup. In fact, if anything, it probably reduces the impact. Well, it does. It reduces the impact on any farmers who are in the North Boynup area. There is the least amount of impact on wetlands. It does not cross. In fact, it doesn't even enter the main watershed of the 5 Mile Brook. Okay, it doesn't enter the watershed of the 5 Mile Brook. There is a wetland which the current bore would cross, and this road, Centenary Road, would cross north of Lilydale Road. However, that's an impact that is unavoidable. There is no additional bridge at any point over the 5 Mile Brook. This proposal has the least impact on the basalt resources that are under Lilydale and Ellenville Roads. It has the least social impact on residents in North Boynup and in Jallora. The flyovers, by moving the bridge work from Yolinda Drive to use that same funding to build flyovers at Norton Prom, and if there's enough money to do the same thing at Hasty, as per the diagram that I gave you, would mean that there would be free-flowing traffic in both directions at Norton Prom and potentially at Hasty if there's sufficient funds. That means there would not be a set of traffic lights at Norton Prom. they're not required. The northbound lanes would be able to continue up and over Norton Prom. People would be able to get in and out of Dalyellup. The only traffic lights would be required for people who need to turn south from Norton Prom to go southbound, and then people turning into, most of the run would be people turning into Dalyellup. So it would be a far greater use of that infrastructure asset. And one of the key priorities for Infrastructure Australia and for Infrastructure Western Australia for any project, and for main roads for any government department, the utility, the utilisation, how much that asset is going to be used is a fundamental factor that they have to take into account. And currently the plan to build a $30 million bridge for Yolinda, where there will only be between perhaps 100 and 200 cars using that on any given day, it's an extraordinary waste of taxpayers' money, where particularly on any given day there's over 15,000 vehicles going up Bustle Highway. So from a utility, from a resources, I've spoken about the requirement to retain some of that basalt for coastal mitigation.
Councillor, you're approaching your 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks. I won't ask for another extension. So it's shorter, it's cheaper. The time differential that ministers or different people have made for commuters between the current plan and this minimalist route would be negligible. It would be negligible. It represents an opportunity for the Shire to have a national park that has already attracted national and international attention. World-renowned documentary makers and botanists have expressed their interest to come and see this corridor. It's our most unique natural asset, and therefore it's a great tourism and economic opportunity. I believe that the government and Minister Plibersek, I believe that given the opportunity to reflect and review this proposal, I believe...
Councillor, I'll need you to
wrap up now.
Wrap up.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's a great opportunity, and I commend this alternative motion to the council.
Councillor Clues.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Noonan, for this motion. I think this was incredibly well done, and I'm glad that you've gone to all the effort and put a lot of passion into creating it. I think it's, for the most simple of reasons this is easy for us to support, is that it's perfectly in line with the current policy position on the bore. So it hits all our desires from previous decisions. It's perfectly in line with what we want and what we think is best. So yeah, I'm happy to vote for it.
Is there a speaker against the motion? Councillor Tarantroy.
There are some really good things in this alternate motion raised by Kieran Noonan, Councillor Noonan. However, I have some concerns. I've got various concerns. First of all, there's other basalt in the Shire of Capel, which is within 10 metres, 20 metres, 30 metres and 50 metres. And this is in a report from the Environmental Geology report that I'm looking at here. So the Allenville and Lilydale Road basalt is not the only basalt in the area. So that's a concern. But the other, there's some differences from the lapse motion from the alternate officer's recommendation. There were some things that were the same, but the major differences is D in the foreshadowed motion, and it talks about 60 years of cost construction instead of, so that's 60 years. So that's, I don't know that we're ever going to get that. E has had the second paragraph removed, which was in the alternate motion by the Shire officers. But in looking at who's going to be affected majorly by this, and I get the tree thing, I really do, and I understand all of that. However, I'm concerned that this flyway, this bridge onto Norton Boulevard into Dalyellup is going to affect high density living people. Because that's going to be close to the shopping centre, like it is at the shopping centre end, and we've got all of those new high-density houses and parks and stuff in that area where people are living with children, and we've got more houses on the other side behind the shopping centre being built, and I think that this bridge, the Bustle Highway Bridge, like the underpass and the bridge over, going north and south, is going to affect a lot more residents. So I'm a bit, yes, I really can't support this emotion with that idea of all of those residents in that high density area of Dalyellup being affected by that overpass at the entrance to Norton Prom. Yes, and also going back to the foreshadowed motion, I'm looking at point 5, 6 and 7, and it's all about the basalt and coastal mitigation. Now, I remember a story as a child, you know, the finger in the dike. You can't stop the ocean. And so I think the best idea we could have is to plan to progressively move from the coast in the next 120 years, because the ocean is going to be the ocean. Water's one of the strongest forces on Earth, and I think it's ridiculous to build communities in places where we know the ocean levels are going to encroach on. And also those sort of things like, you know, putting in rock walls and building sea walls, we know they fail eventually, and and that's very expensive. So there are a few of my concerns. And as I said before, there are some really good things in this foreshadowed motion. However, as it stands, I can't support it. So, besides moving to remove some, I'd like to amend the foreshadowed motion, is it?
You can move an amendment, Councillor, yes?
That we take, well, there's going to have to be another way rather than this, to remove the idea of having the entry, the flyover, basically the entry into Norton Promenade and the north and south and all of that intersection there. That'll need further investigation because it's going to affect too many people.
That amendment, apologies, I'll probably cut you off then, sorry.
So to take that off. So that's the entry into Norton Prom. So I don't know I've got nothing to replace it with though, that's the problem. The other thing I would want to remove is perhaps condense 5, 6 and 7 because they all talk about the same thing, the basalt.
I'm
looking at the foreshadowed motion,
are you attempting to amend it though?
Yeah.
Because those amendments would substantially alter.
I know.
So I couldn't accept it as an amendment. You'd have to foreshadow something.
Well, we only received this second lot this at like 2 o'clock or 2:30 this afternoon. So how could I prepare anything like that for this meeting to be able to do that?
Yep. That's.
So basically, I can't support it in its current form. It affects too many people.
Is there a speaker for the motion? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. I'll put aside any comments regarding some of the biggest trees in the world and the culturally significant sites that are within the corridor, and I will just focus on 2 points. We like to say on this council that we behave in a way that it is conscious of climate change and global warming, and I support this motion for the preservation of the corridor for an additional 2 reasons, which complement the said position of this Shire. Beginning with the basalt, so there's a 1996 report from the Bunbury Planning Department, and it makes 2 points. That there's potential for 150 years of extraction at existing rates from one property and 70 years from a second. It is considered that to make maximum use of the state's natural resources, full extraction of the basalt should be allowed from the Julurup area. It is recommended that the state should view the strategic regional requirements for long-term access to the whole resource area. The Bunbury basalt is a very cost-effective resource of aggregate because of the nature of the basalt and its mode of occurrence compared with alternative rock. For the region to be deprived of access to this would be to deny it of a significant natural resource, which could have significant economic implications. Alternative hard rock sources east of the Darling Fault are considered unlikely to be able to provide the same consistent high-quality material. So that's from a 1996 report regarding climate change and the requirement for access to basalt for future resources. The other reason is that each mature tree absorbs between 25 and 35 kilos of carbon every year. I don't know how many mature trees would actually be within 72 hectares of the corridor, but it's a lot. And the offsets, when Main Roads talk about offsets, it isn't with mature trees, it's with new trees. And they just don't provide the same absorption of carbon and emissions of clean oxygen as mature trees. So for no other reason than those 2 reasons, I support the alternative motion put together by Councillor Noonan.
Is there a speaker against the motion? Councillor McCleary?
It's going to take a long time. This design is absolutely stupid. It doesn't address...
Point of order.
Yeah,
it doesn't address
Councillor,
the
hang on.
concerns.
I'll ask you to withdraw the comment, please.
All right, I'll withdraw the comment.
Thank you.
It's not a viable option. It's been rejected by Main Roads. It is Robinson Drive Take 2. It will do nothing. Now we'll work down the Bustle Highway. First of all, Bustle Highway along the Dalyellup side has a flood mitigation process. It has the 1 in a 100-year flood does not get under 5 Mile Brook culverts. It runs down the highway. So you need room for that flood mitigation. You've then got the gas pipelines, all other utility structures running down there. So then you've got to deal with them. You've then got, at the intersection, where you want to put the flyover, you've got a house with the... We've been trying to put a footpath in that area, and it doesn't fit. So now you're trying to put 2 more lanes in there, and a bridge and an overpass, and you're going to put everything up there. It's just not on. Finally, this item that came to us was about dedication of road reserves. We've suddenly gone from dedication of road reserves to pretending we can design a road. You're not designers. There's heaps of people working on Main Roads. They've gone through the process. They know how to design roads. They use the statistics. They've done 4 years of engineering at university. They've gone out and got the statistics for traffic management.
A point of order, Councillor?
I'm not sure who Councillor McCleary is accusing of not being a designer, but I assume he probably isn't aware of the background behind the creation of this motion to the degree at which the mover or creator was.
I don't see the point of order, councillor.
For all we know, there was a designer, engineer involved in the creation of the motion. I'm not sure who is being accused of not being...
I understand your angle, but that's not a valid point of order.
Well, I think it's being disparaging of the mover of the motion that he needn't have had the authority or ability to have moved this motion.
Okay. Councillor McCleary, I'll ask that you keep your comments more in keeping with the Shire's code of conduct.
Okay. All I'm going to say is, whatever this decision that gets up, it's got to go back to main roads. They're going to go, no worries, and they'll still get the dedication of the roads. That's what happens. That's the reality of where we're heading. The road's under construction. It's a big wish list. So therefore, I don't see that this is going to get any legs. You can give it a go, but it's going to fail.
Council, I'll ask you to stop speaking during debate. Are there any speakers for the motion? Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, President. I support this motion and I thank Councillor Noonan for presenting it. This motion backs up from my experience as being a resident of the Shire of Capel and attending the CRG meetings that the board team delivered for 18 months at the Julurup Hall. All the representatives there concurred after listening to all the points presented to us that Centenary Road was a better option and the least impact environment, social, economic. This motion supports that. And now I'm here in this chair supporting all of the Shire and thinking I'm not happy with that community consultation. Nothing was backed by the supporters there who represented the community in various ways. Community consultation is so important, and this is why we've led to this. You know, and I'd just like to put forward, we've got two great highways already in structure. The density of traffic just needs to be moved away from Bunbury's major infrastructure like the hospital, TAFE and uni. This backs that, and also knowing that we do not have any current offset land for projects. This also backs that motion that I put forward regarding that. This motion backs everything that I've heard of people in our Shire, and what I don't support is how the department has divided and conquered our Shire people. That is morally wrong. So I just consider everything that's this motion put forward. Thank you.
Councillor Sciano.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have some questions to the mover, if I may ask.
The mover happy to receive? Yep.
So I just want to understand the background to the report, to the alternative motion and the supporting documents behind. And it was sort of touched base by some of the potential point of orders and Councillor McCleary's discussion, but who did produce this background and design?
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Councillor Sciano, and I thank Councillor McCleary for raising those points at the start. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to those. One of my cousins is a road designer. He used to work with Main Roads. He gave me some assistance with looking at the proposal. At the CRG meetings that Councillor Mogg has mentioned for the board consultation, when these sorts of suggestions, different alternatives were put to, say, Dominic Boyle, the project manager at the time, his response was, "We can do anything."
Councillor, I need you to remain on answering the question.
Yeah, well,
not debating it.
It is. We can do anything. So main roads have the engineers. Those engineers have the capacity to do anything. They are very confident in their ability, and I have every confidence in the ability of the main roads engineers.
Point of order.
Point of order, Councillor Clues.
Does the chair now say that it might be appropriate to ask for an apology for the accusation of the appropriateness of the councillor putting the motion forward?
The matter's been dealt with, Councillor. That's not a valid point of order. Councillor Sciano.
Supplementary question to the mover, if I can, please. So, having identified that some of this was produced by someone with background that you've mentioned, so what level of community consultation has occurred in with the CRG or affected landholders? What level of involvement have they had in bringing this plan to council?
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Councillor Sciano. This particular motion, there was a very strong sentiment at the Jalorup Community CRG meetings where there was a desire to move a lot of the traffic, the connecting roads from Hasty off Hasty, and a number of alternatives were looked at. So Duquesne was looked at, Jalorup Rise was looked at, Woods Road was looked at, but the option that was most amenable to the community at the time was the Centenary Road option. And so by changing the actual bore route itself to Centenary Road, that is taking on that expression of the community. That's a better option. Yeah. And
I think the question's been answered. Is there any further questions?
If I can just use my opportunity to still speak.
Yes.
I appreciate that, because I mean one of the big considerations we have to make as councillors is obviously the validity of what the material that we have in front of us, and what and making sound planning decisions and considering all the background information available. And I think understanding what expertise or what expertise may have, or potentially community consultation has gone into a plan that's been presented to council. I don't, and though I appreciate Councillor Noonan has answered my questions, I don't know if they gave me the full confidence that I needed. I mean, per se, I do agree. I think it was very clear from the community that a connection of some sort or a route through Centenary Road was quite popular within the community, quite popular within the community that have been involved in that consultation process and the CRG process. I don't feel that major infrastructure changes in this plan and the particular detail of this plan has had quite that level of community scrutiny, given that there is also some additions in here of interchange changes with Norton Promenade. I also, and with respect obviously to the individual who assisted Councillor Noonan with putting together, and the group with putting together this plan, but diagram 2 is from a video game called City Skylines. So I don't know, and I play a bit of City Skylines if you haven't figured it out, but I don't know if this is in the place that it needs to be taken to the federal and state governments as a true alternative. And I think Councillor McCleary also raised the point that I think what we're trying to do at this current time is actually try and do two things. So we're still trying to deal with some level of lands and reserves. I mean, good on the mover for knocking in a 60-year warranty period. It's a big ask, but it's a dream. But I don't feel comfortable presenting this as council's plan to the authorities that have that this implies. So I won't say anything further, but I appreciate the mover's indulgence in answering my questions.
Point of order, a follow-up.
A point of order,
Point of order
Councillor?
7.6. It's a point of order you enacted earlier this evening, but I believe you may have failed to complete the actions dictated by 7.6. The last line and a half of text of 7.6 is what I'm referring to.
The satisfactory apology, you mean? That, if that's the council's wish that I fully apply that, which has been rarely, in my 5 years, has never been applied, but from now on, should that be the wish?
I've already asked it, and now I'm only asking that we follow the
Okay,
the
well, I can from now, but the thing is, though, that matter's been dealt with, and we've moved on.
Yeah,
I don't have the power to now enforce a point of order which has been dealt with.
I'll speak to you after the meeting.
Councillor Andrew, a question? Yes?
Their question through the chair to Councillor Noonan, if I could. Their Centenary Road is a road reserve. Does this fit within the road reserve, so it won't have any impact on any housing or land ownership either side?
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Councillor Andrews, for the question. Centenary Road is a road reserve for a two-lane road. So it has the same problem in terms of width to fit 4 lanes in it as the Bore had. However, the difference is that there are no houses along the Centenary Road road reserve on either side in such close proximity as those houses that are affected through the current Bore plan. It's also important to make the point that that it is primarily cleared farmland, and so that there is not the same impact on vegetation, native vegetation and possum habitat.
Question, Councillor Towntroy?
Yeah, I have a question. So this road reserve, will there have to be more trees knocked down in this area?
Councillor
More
Noonan?
mature trees? Through the chair, sorry.
Yes, I'll reiterate that the road reserve through Centenary Road is predominantly, or is through already cleared farmland. There are some trees that will need to be removed. However, I'll make the point that there are over 3,000 mature trees within the Julorp corridor, and of those, over 2,000 are still standing in the section that has not yet been cleared. And to make that follow-up point that Councillor Andrew made, those 2,000 mature trees have a far greater impact on withdrawing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as opposed to the far fewer trees that are on the farmland Centenary Road link, which is
Okay, I think you've answered the question,
anyway.
Councillor. That's
So I have a further question to
Yes.
to that question. So in doing this foreshadowed motion, have you done a survey to support what you've just said, of the number of mature trees, the number of habitat trees, and the number of animals that would be affected by the clearing of that?
Councillor Noonan?
That information has been gathered by, and it is contained in various main roads reports. There are possums. There is possum habitat right throughout, all the way from from Harvey all the way down to Bustleton.
I think that's.
But there are far fewer possums would be impacted.
Yep.
Or
I think that satisfactorily answers the question, I believe.
Thank you.
All right. Question, Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. Question to Councillor Noonan through the chair, if I could.
Yes.
Probably the one thing that I have an issue with is 1B. When you talk about flyovers at the Norton Promenade Bustle Highway Exchange, would you be amenable to removing that and then kind of, I guess, letting Main Roads design what they what should go there? That interchange also sounds...
Sorry, point of order. This has already been refused. You said it would change it. You said it would change it substantially to remove the fly bridge and the entry onto Norton Prom, and they would leave nothing there. And I responded that I haven't had time from 2:30 this afternoon to actually have anything alternate to foreshadow it with.
My interpretation of what you were suggesting originally was more substantial than that. This is just a change to 1 point, so I don't think the same ruling applies.
I'd be happy to answer the question.
And Councillor Andrew, have you finished the question?
I just wanted to say that I feel the tone that from other councillors that point there is kind of their sticking point.
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew and Councillor Sharon Troy, for also raising that concern. The flyovers that are proposed at Norton Prom and at Hasty, if sufficient funds are available to be redirected from the Yalinda Road bridge, the $30 million plus bridge at Yalinda. Those flyovers can, as other flyovers that you can see every day in Perth, those flyovers can have sound walls on them. Those sound walls...
I don't think that's to the degree the question that was asked. You're more debating that now and suggesting ideas.
Yeah.
So I think we'll leave that there.
Could I address the rest of the question?
Well, the question was really if you were amenable to removing that point.
Yeah.
And I suppose the answer to that would be that's for the council to determine through an amendment.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't just change it now.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And I think it's an engineering question, and by removing the traffic lights as well, it prevents it means that there'll be less noise from braking and from gear changing as well, and so it'll have a reduced impact.
We'll leave it there.
Residents of Dalial.
Does that answer your question? All right. Are there any further speakers? Everyone's spoken except me, so that leaves me. All right, I'll speak. When this originally came through, I had a good look at it because there's a lot of good points in it, mainly about the completion of the Willinge extension down at the Central Board South West Highway. To me, that was a real common sense decision to have that in there. While it was resulting in clearing around a river and another bridge, that strain light access from South West Highway right up direct into the port just made efficiency sense to me, and that's the same line that we've continually heard about the ring road, about it being efficient, well, to increase efficiency around here with the freight network, and that's why I'm quite disappointed with some of the decisions that have been made around the grade separations. on this more southern end. You know, the northern end's getting the good flyovers and the bigger bridges, whereas the southern end we're getting roundabouts which have a questionable lifetime left on them. There's a lot in this which is also stuff that's already happening, such as Delora corridor being provided offsets. The direct corridor, as we can see from the clearing work that's happening, isn't going to be an offset, but there are plenty of other land around there which is now being dedicated as an offset. But for a lot of the reasons similar to Councillor Sciano, I just haven't seen this worked to the detail that the current route is, and while there is objections to the current route and those in favour of it, whatever, it's gone through years of meticulous research, engineering drawings, fauna studies, flora studies, you name it, whether it's the right or wrong decision, whether we agree with it, that's the process that's gone through. And I just don't see this as a workable alternative. So for that reason, I can't support it. So I'll leave it there. There being all members having spoken, I'll return the call to the mover to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the comments of all councillors, and I'll try and address as many of them as I can. The basalt resource, it's worth $1 in the ground to the property owner. The main cost for basalt is about $20 or so to crush it. Every time you pick it up, put it in a truck, move it from one place to another, adds to the cost of the basalt. It's between $1 and $2 per kilometre that you have to transport it. Okay, and that actually becomes the major cost for getting basalt. So the closer the resource is to the end site, the better it is. So that basalt being the closest resource to Bunbury and to Capel is very valuable. Now there's basalt all the way down past Capel, all the way down to Black Rock on the to the east of Augusta. It's deeper. It has vegetation over it already, which overburden, which has to be cleared. And as Councillor Andrew made the point, there are many reports which say that existing resources should be exhausted before new resources are, which are further away because they're going to be more expensive, should be looked at. The 60-year warranty for the cost of construction, absolutely we should ask for it. That's Kirsten McKechnie has made the point on numerous occasions that that's the lifespan of a road. That's what we calculate the lifespan of a road. We didn't ask for these roads. And I think that we should ask for, if they're going to be given to us, foisted on us, I don't think that the ratepayers of Capel should have to pay for them. I think we should ask for 60 years worth, and if they come back and say we'll give you 5, then that's on them. E doesn't account or apply because the roads wouldn't need to be renamed because this approach, this minimum approach, doesn't cross any of those roads. It doesn't require any renaming of roads. The Norton Prom Bridge, that can have sound walls on it. There will be less sound from braking and gear changes as there currently is, where trucks and vehicles have to slow down and stop at the lights. There are currently no sound walls on Norton Prom. The Netherlands would have been underwater decades ago. The east coast of the United States of America would have been underwater decades ago if they didn't build coastal mitigation. The Willings extension, I agree with you, Councillor Kitchen, that the efficiency of having Willings Drive provides a far better opportunity to have separation of heavy and light vehicles. The current plan, without having that Willings Drive extension, means that all of the lithium trucks coming up from the Southwest Highway will have to go around the roundabout at the prison, and they will then join all of the traffic going from the Bore central bore to then turn left to go up to the port or to continue on out to Kemerton. That is a recipe for disaster. There are going to be, as there was tragically this week, a death, a vehicle accident, and I believe it involved a light vehicle and a truck, just near to that location. So I think the Willings Drive extension is critical. Now, we've addressed the design of the roads, the CRG. The design of the roads, one of the problems from this proposal for the last 40 years, we're looking at a road that was a 2-lane highway proposed 48 years ago. And the problem was that it is not fit for purpose. It never was fit for purpose. And the problem that we have is that the scope that the CRG was given was so restrictive. In fact, the scope said that it had to go through this road reserve. That was why main roads only put up to the EPA, the state and federal EPA, they only put up this option. It was the only option that the EPAs were able to assess. Main roads had already done it, and that's because of the restrictive scope that the bore team was given. Now, we should not be hamstrung. I don't believe the state should be hamstrung, or the nation should be hamstrung in a way that we're going to destroy one of the most valuable assets that we have, simply because of a narrow focused scope, which arguably could have been designed or planned with other motives in mind. Now, the point has been made that this has contributed to division in the community and that we would like to heal the community. Absolutely, I would like to see the community healed. I know that a lot of suffering and pain has been experienced, and a lot of people have been fearful that, oh gee, if we shift the road anywhere else, it's going to affect us, it's whatever, we're going to lose our farm and so on and so forth. This proposal does not impact any farms in the North Boynup area in the rest of the Shire. It is taking a necessary evil.
Time warning, that's all.
Okay. It's taking it... no, I'm not even going to call the bore an evil. It's not an evil. I think it's a vital piece of infrastructure, and I welcome the bore coming. It's taking a vital piece of infrastructure and it's looking to make it better by reducing the impact, its environmental impact, its economic impact, its social impact, so that we as a Shire can get this vital piece of infrastructure, but that we don't do it by jeopardising or losing access to tremendous natural assets and to the resources that we are going to need to mitigate the coast as climate change continues to wreak its havoc. So I thank all the councillors for their contributions and their questions, and I commend the motion to you.
All right, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? And that's a tie vote again, 4-4. The item does require an absolute majority, as it is granting consent to reserves. So the presiding member will have to cast their vote, but it won't make any difference. As previously stated, I don't believe casting votes should be used to set a precedent or create majorities that aren't there, so the casting vote will be cast in the negative. The item's lost 4-5. We now move to item 15, Community and Corporate Reports. 15.1. There's an officer's recommendation there. Is there a mover? Councillor Andrew. A seconder. Councillor Tarantroy. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. I'll move it as read, and I have a couple of questions through the chair if I could.
Yep.
So, EFT 39922, accommodation for training at the city of Busselton.
The Director of Community and Corporate.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll just take that on notice and provide that information to you.
Awesome. The second one is EFT 40001, the LGIS insurance for marine, hull, pontoon and cargo.
The Director of Community and Corporate.
Again, I'll take that on notice. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm understanding that might be the pontoon that was placed out off Peppy Beach, wasn't it? But we'll still take that on notice and
Just
make sure.
EFT 40003. This one should perhaps go to the CEO rather than Director for Corporate. I'm wondering why we didn't have someone to remove the basketball ring ourselves. With all due respect, I would have thought that it just required an angle grinder and a trailer.
We'll take that on notice.
All right, EFT 40029, the replacement of the shade sails, and whether or not that's claimable on insurance.
Take on notice, Councillor. I can look into the background as to those removals.
And last but not least, EFT 40152, guideposts and street signs to the value of $7,500. Where did they go? I should say, where were they put, and why?
Yeah, take on notice again, Councillor. Thank you. I'll provide you with that information.
Anything further? Yep. Councillor Tarantroy. Any discussion? Councillor Andrew, anything further? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Item 15.2. Sorry, I've got a misprint over. It's printed over itself, so I can't read it. Sorry. I'll just want to say it for those listening online. Item 15.2, Ironstone Gully Falls Reserve, future use and management approach. Is there a mover for that item? Councillor Tarantroy. Is there a seconder? Councillor McCleary. Councillor Tarantroy. Your microphone, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Clues. I move it as read, but I won't read the whole thing, but I will read the proposal just for those who are watching. So it's to determine the intended approach to the allowance of camping at Ironstone Gully Falls and to develop a land use reserve management approach for the area, highlighting the cultural, historical significance of the site, in addition to unlocking sustainable environmental, educational and recreational opportunities for the community and also for visitors. Yeah.
Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Ironstone Gully Falls Park and setting up cultural heritage has been going on for quite a number of years, and I remember previous councillor Scott was quite involved with it, and also the officers involved. I did a bit of a walkthrough with the heritage people along with Councillor Mogg, and I think there's some good outcomes coming in there. We basically need some funding sometime in the future to finalise everything there. So yeah, look, I commend this motion.
A question or speaking against? Councillor Clues.
Well, I'd like to move an amendment, please.
Yep.
To remove point 2.
Is there a seconder to that amendment? Councillor Andrew. Councillor Clues.
Thank you. Not the least of reasons, but the point 2, as it is, completely contradicts the proposal that is the opening paragraph of this item. The proposal is to determine the intended approach to the allowance of camping. And then point 2 is expecting council to endorse the cessation of camping activities. I don't understand why this contradiction is so close on the paper and no one noticed. But more broadly, this item was to council, I think it was 2 years ago, 18 months ago, somewhere around there. Council had a decision on this only 18 months ago. It wasn't long. We've been through all the information that we've now been shown again. There's nothing new whatsoever been shown from what was shown 18 months ago. 18 months ago, council made a decision, and the decision was to leave it alone. The decision was, well, yeah, we'll keep looking at it. Maybe one day we'd like to do some stuff, but the decision at the time was to leave it alone. The only thing that council endorsed changing was the installation of a gate, and the only instance which that gate was supposed to be closed was during an extreme fire risk period. The gate was installed, the gate was closed, and it was left closed, in complete contradiction to what was council's direction. And now, all we see now is another attempt to enforce the closure of this gate. I can't believe it took the whole time since the gate was closed. We kept bringing it up. We sat in this room. We have Mondays and we have round tables, and I can't remember how many times we asked, why is this gate closed? Why is this gate closed? This gate should be open. We must have said it to three acting CEOs and one substantive, and still the gate remained closed until only a few weeks ago, when finally we got the response that was the council's direction that was finally followed. Now, as I understand it, council at the time was of the belief that I am still now, that we don't want to close down access to that area. It's vitally important to the residents of the Shire. They love having that area. Obviously, it's attracting people that are passing through, and it's great. You cannot get camper vans in and out of there safely with that gate shut. They require that area to turn their campers around. So no, we didn't want to endorse overnight stay and endorse long-term stay or short-term stay, but we wanted it left alone. Me now, I still want it left alone. I'd be happy to look at what we can do to make some minor improvements and probably look at putting some things in future budgets for some minor works if there's some concerns about the cleared area pushing out that I haven't seen any actual evidence of happening in any significant form whatsoever. But you know, it's not hard to chuck some logs in or some posts in to stop that people encroaching into the forest down there. You know, I don't want to see us closing that gate, closing the residents out of that area. You know, with every survey we do, we see time and time again how important the residents of our Shire hold these natural environment areas and their access to it, and how important it is to them. But here we've had a council decision previously that's just been completely ignored for some reason, and now we see another attempt to enforce the closing of this gate against the wishes of the community and this council. It's disappointing to say the least, to be honest. You know, I suppose the only thing else I would have is a question through the chair, if I may. That what exactly is the appropriate action when council makes a lawful direction and it's ignored, or at worst contradicted and worked against in practice?
Well, there is a complaints handling process for something down that line, But I suppose that's what this item is tonight, is to determine that approach, whether it's allowing camping or not. And that's for council to decide.
Thank you. Again, I believe that that's the way we're being fed this issue as well, is that we are being requested to determine whether or not we allow camping. It's absolutely unnecessary to put it in those kinds of absolutes. It's currently not okay to camp there. It has never been okay to camp there. We don't need to change anything to maintain the fact that it's not okay to camp there. What we're being asked to do is just another attempt to close that gate and close that area off. That is all this is. I'd love to see a management plan for future upgrades. I'd love to see us supported as a day use for cultural areas. Fantastic. But we need to get, I think, this idea of closing that gate out of our future thoughts. Quite frankly, I now regret agreeing to put the gate in the first place.
Councillor Andrew.
Sorry. It's referred to as a reserve multiple times. Is it actually part of a national park?
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President, the area is a reserve where the Shire has management control over. So it's Crown land, and the Shire has care and control of the land through a management order.
So it is national park? Well, I guess that bit doesn't really matter. My point is in other parts of the state, when you go to bush areas, you pay a vehicle entrance charge. Is that something that we could possibly look at to mitigate some of the costs? Or is that a state regulation or some specific legislation that would actually prevent us from doing that?
So, yeah, as I understand it, Isugai is reserved. There is state forest in that area. I think it might not be directly across the road, but it is that western side of the southern side of the road. Options for potential cost recovery are something the council could look at. Augusta and Margaret River do that in a lot of their local sites. That's something that the council could request a report back on. Sorry, Councillor Andrew, do you not wish to speak? No, that was it. All right. Councillor McCleary, a question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find out in the report where the intention was to lock the gate again. I couldn't see it in the report.
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President, it's not the intention to lock the gate. It's for Councillor Clues was right. Council has previously considered 18 months ago an item around camping. However, the decision that wasn't supported, the recommendation that wasn't supported by Council at the time was around identifying it as a formal camping area. What this report endeavours to do is to, in making that decision at that time, it failed to clarify from the administration point of view whether or not to allow, on a tolerance basis, continued camping on an informal basis. What this report seeks to do in one case is to get a final clear view from Council on camping, formal and informal. The intention, if that's supported by Council, is that the gate would remain open to allow people to continue to access that area, to use the barbecues that are already there and those types of things. It would simply give the Shire administration the authority to take action against people that camp there, and to then continue to allow the day use of that area to be enhanced.
Concludes the question.
Please, thank you. Is the Ironstone Gully Falls currently a lawful camping ground?
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President, it's not a dedicated camping area under the Caravan and Camping Grounds Act 1995.
Correct. So do we then already have the lawful authority to remove people that are camping or make action, make a fine, whatever it is? We already have the authority, as I understand it, to take action against people that are camping improperly or whatever.
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President, I mean, that is correct. The ability is there for Shire officers to take action. The challenge, I guess, for Shire officers is that tolerance approach to camping has been something that's clearly been allowed for some time, but you are correct. All the report is seeking is absolute clarity.
Thank you. Final question was, I guess I just want to confirm then that there is no intention anywhere in this item to close the gate as a means of stopping camping.
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President, for clarity, what we're seeking is Council's final position on camping. The intention is absolutely to not close the gate, but to continue to allow people in cars to drive into that area, use the picnic table there, use the barbecues there. I was only out there a couple of weeks ago and there was a car that was in there because the gate was open, as you indicated. They'd pulled up there, they had the eskies out, they were enjoying the table and the barbecue. We absolutely intend for that to continue, and just to simply protect the native vegetation area and to enhance the trails. Perfect, thank you. So I will just confirm, because my actual question wasn't specifically answered, and I'll try and narrow it down a little more. I just want confirmation that the gate will not be used as a tool to stop camping any time in the future post this decision.
The Chief Executive Officer.
That is correct, Councillor.
Thank you kindly, that's music to my ears.
I just have a question through the chair.
I saw Councillor Scano's hand first, because it was in front of me.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll make this really quick. I just want to go back to June 2020. That's, Councillor Clues and I think are completely on the same page. Council, and I remember the debate quite well, made the decision not to make it a formal camping ground because we wanted to allow it to maintain its amenity and its character, and allow for the activities which were or may not have been going on there, were going on there, to continue. I just quite simply want us to get back to that. I think it is a good idea, however, to develop a reserve management and upgrade plan. I think a component of that may potentially be, do you, in that you may identify that you do charge vehicle access overnight. That is something that Department of Biosecurity, Conservation and Attractions does within its national parks. It's obviously not a national park, it's just a nature reserve of Crown land, but we'll get that. But for now, I want to get back to the closest thing we can to pre-July 2020.
Councillor Trantor, your question?
No, it was answered, it was covered, thank you.
Are there any further speakers on the amendment? Councillor Clues, do you wish to close on your amendment?
Thank you, yes. I think I completely agree and thank Councillor Scarno. I think the removal of this point 2 is just common sense, and it reinforces what we'd already decided 18 months ago. It's the point 2 is just completely unnecessary and moot, because frankly there's already local laws in place that cover it anyway. So there's no need for point 2 whatsoever.
I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That's carried 7-1. That becomes the substantive motion. Councillor Cluj, you still have the call.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm stoked to see once again confirming that the Shire and the Council wish to, hopefully, I guess it's the recommendation is anyway, for us to endorse the Falls as a day use area. It's something that we've done before and more than happy to do again. And also, we have discussed it a lot of times, and we are aware that there's going to be issues come up. There may be some future requirements of the area. So I think it's a good idea to have some kind of planning involved around that, and to just make sure we know what all our options are and what possibilities are. And you know, if there's some damage occurring, we're going to need to manage it just the same way we do with the beaches that are all open for cars. If people are up driving in the dunes or doing the wrong things around the place, it's just something we need to manage. But keeping that access open is absolute priority for me. So I'm glad to see we're doing that. What was the other? Yeah, look, I think I'll leave it at that. I think we seem to be mostly on the same page, so I'm happy.
Are there any other speakers to the item? Councillor Terrantroy, do you wish to close?
Look, I actually haven't been to Ironstone Gully. I must go. I've heard lots about it. I think that any area that we have that we encourage people to use, locals and visitors, respectfully, to care for the vegetation. And this is why we didn't want the overnight camping, because they were encroaching in and they were taking a lot of like flattening flora and yeah, basically encroaching into the bush and leaving a lot of rubbish and other undesirable things. So yeah, so I think this is a really good local amenity that we have. Actually, it's not a local amenity. It's, well, there are barbecues there, but yeah, it's a beautiful place from what I've been told, and I must go and look at it, check it out. Yeah, so I just encourage everyone to yeah, vote for the motion.
With that, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Item 15.3, the financial statements for the 30th of June 2022. Is there a mover for those? Councillor Andrew. A seconder? Councillor McCleary. Councillor Andrew. Councillor McCleary. Any discussion on those? Councillor Andrew. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Item 15.4, Community Sport and Recreation Facilities Fund, Small Grants Round, Dalyellup Youth Precinct, Stage 2, Pump Track. Councillor Sciano. Is there a seconder? Councillor McCleary. Councillor Sciano.
Thank you, Mr. President. I mean, in this item, we're simply just looking to endorse a small grant application. You know, the staff, I mean, it's convenient. We always identify them as well planned and needed by the municipality. But it's also already committed expenditure. I mean, these always come down to the point where we get the tender back, and that's where the real discussion needs to be had around the financials. So obviously commend the recommendation to endorse a small grant application for Stage 2 of the Dalyellup Youth Precinct, the Pump Track.
Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first question I'm going to ask is if you and the Deputy President are going to get on your bikes and do the pump track like you did out the front here all those years ago.
No comment.
All right, look, this has been a long time coming. It's going to be a great facility for the Dalyellup area and Stratham. It's close to all those areas. We probably need to get some interconnecting pathways sometime in the future. But yeah, look, I'm all for this active sport. I think we were told earlier today in a round table that every dollar that we spend on sport is $7 into the community, so we've got to think of that. So if we do this multiply by $7, that's pretty damn good.
Are there any speakers against the item? Speakers for? Any further discussion? Councillor Terran-Troy?
Look, as an educator, anything that gets young people off their devices and doing something physical, I'm for. So I think it's a great thing. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Councillor Sciar? No? Wish to close?
I just reiterate the comment that Peter McCleary made, Councillor McCleary made. The multiplier effect that sports and culture and recreation have on our community often goes unnoticed. It's always talked about, oh, it's a waste of this, it's a waste of that, but the multiplier effect that it has on the community, and by having and making a decision a few years ago to put this youth precinct in the centre of Dale-up was a fantastic decision, and it only just goes to show just the impact that projects like this will have on a community, they'll have on the local economy, and I'll say that there won't be any cameras allowed at the launch because there is a secret video somewhere of Councillor Kitchen falling off his longboard when we opened this youth precinct. So commend the officer's recommendation.
I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Item 16, new business of an urgent nature. There is none, so we move to item 17, public question time. Are there any further public questions? Mrs. Givings?
Thank you. At the July Council meeting, I asked a question without notice regarding the existing access road for heavy vehicles from Gavins Road into Lot 801 Gavins Road, and if it had been given approval by the Shire of Capel, and if so, what were the conditions? The response that I became aware of today was access details will be considered as part of the assessment of the proposal. Pardon my confusion, but if the road has already been constructed and existed for more than a year, wouldn't the road and the associated entry-exit point have needed approval with a requirement to meet conditions for that approval to be granted? So, on which date was approval to construct the road on Lot 801 Gavins Road with the existing entry-exit point onto Gavins Road given? And, given approval, what were the conditions, including, but not confined to, the setback from the shared internal boundary, crossover point, sealing of the road to mitigate dust, and proximity to a single lane bridge? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Givings, for the question. Some of those particulars we'll have to take on notice, giving you wanting exact dates for certain things, but generally internal road infrastructure isn't requirement of a approval, but we'll take that on notice and provide a response. Are there any further questions? No? All right, we'll move to motions without notice. Are there any? No. Notices of motions for consideration at the next ordinary meeting of the council. Nothing. There are no items for consideration behind closed doors. And with that, I'll declare the meeting closed at 9:23 p.m. Thank you very much for your attendance tonight. Enjoy the rest of your evening.